Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Maisie Harris. I'm an assistant curator in the Department of Photographs at the J. Paul Getty Museum and the curator of the current Getty Museum exhibition, In Focus Protest. I am so pleased to welcome you for a conversation between Chris Graves, one of the artists included in the exhibition. You'll see his work at the center of the screen. Chris Graves will be joining in conversation with art historian LaRon Brooks. Together, they'll discuss various ways of documenting and visualizing protest. I'm joining you from my home in Los Angeles on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples with honor and respect for the rich and long history of this region. A few details about today's session. Closed captioning has been enabled, and so to use that, you can click the CC button at the bottom of your screen. Please submit questions through the Q&A function. LaRon and Chris will address those at the end of the program. This conversation is being recorded, and it will be available on the Getty's YouTube channel. I'm so honored to introduce Chris Graves, whose work is included in the Getty Museum exhibition In Focus Protest. As you can see a view of that installation here, and that exhibition is open at the Getty Center until October 10th. And you'll see his photograph of the Robert E. Lee Memorial in Richmond, Virginia, at the center of the image at the far right of the last wall of the exhibition. I'm so grateful to Chris, his gallerist, and my Getty colleague, Azota Poji, for helping to make this piece available for inclusion in the exhibition. His bio is in the chat so that you can read more about Chris and his work. And I'm very much looking forward to his perspective on the challenges of visualizing such a momentous year. My thanks also to my colleague, LaRon Brooks, Associate Curator of Modern and Contemporary Collections at the Getty Research Institute. LaRon will join Chris in conversation after we've had a chance to hear a bit from the artist about his work. For now, I'll pass it over to Chris with my thanks to Chris, LaRon, and to all of you for joining us today. Hi, Chris.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here with us today. So I'm going to share my screen and let me just see. Okay. So my name is Chris Graves. I'm a photographer living and based in New York. I was born in Queens, New York City, and I live in Queens now. I've been photographing recently over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. Specifically, I've been photographing the American landscape and the problems and issues that occur within the landscape, as well as the portraits of people within the landscape. So the work I was doing kind of before the National Geographic work was, I have a series named Oblique Reality, where I photographed 8 locations where Black people were murdered by police officers. This is a scene where Michael Brown was murdered. I know this is like the happiest way to start a Zoom call, but bear with me. So this is in Ferguson, Missouri. I only have one of these to show you, but there's 7 more as part of this project that I worked on with Vanity Fair some years ago. And then I've been on the road photographing landscapes wherever I find them. So this is what I find them. This is in West Virginia, which is a fun one, a huge wall. I think this is like a 1,000 wall, probably a wall a mile long almost, with a lot of these drawings on them, which kind of tells this strange story. This is in the middle of Tennessee somewhere. I thought it was like completely ridiculous, so I had to photograph it. I mean, usually I'm just on the road and seeing things, making photographs randomly, really. I just kind of search, these things find me, I would say. This was in Syracuse, and this was in Richmond, Virginia, when I was doing some work with National Geographic. This is just another view of that large. So what happened was National Geographic last year, about June, called me and asked me if I would go to Virginia to photograph the protests that were happening within Virginia, mostly in Richmond, some in DC, and just the surrounding areas of that. So it was the middle of COVID, but I had a friend that was willing to break his quarantine to travel with me I was staying in Massachusetts at the time, and he was also, we drove from Massachusetts to DC and then made these photographs. So not this photograph in particular, these are just some of the photographs that led into the project. So this is this is called Monk's Mound, in a Native American mound in Illinois, near St. Louis, right outside of East St. Louis. And we lead into this wonderful scene that I think everyone knows, this painting. And then we get into the National Geographic work. So pretty much my first job with National Geographic was photographing Richmond. And that led to me photographing for 24 days. I went around the South photographing Confederate monuments, pretty much. All the Confederate monuments I could find in the course of 24 days. I think me and my assistant ended up photographing about 179 or 180 Confederate monuments total. We were also photographing scenes where, architectural scenes. I think of myself as kind of a landscape and architectural photographer. So trying to show you the scene of where, this racist past took place. So this is a scene of an auction block in Charlottesville. The flowers are where the auction block was recently removed. I think I got there maybe a few days after that. I'm not going to explain each photograph because there's a ton I want to show you guys, but you can see that these are all kind of in flux areas in this part of the series. I call it latency. For National Geographic, we called it monuments. And the first story ran on the website, National Geographic's website, last June. The second story, the second piece I had was a travel piece about Stone Mountain, Georgia, which is a very interesting place if you ever want to see the largest Confederate monument in the country, and one of the largest. It's bigger than Mount Rushmore, and it's chiseled into the side of a mountain. So anyway, so the second thing was photographing Stone Mountain, and then the third piece was going on the road for 24 days and 4,000 miles, photographing the Confederate monuments and schools schools with Confederate names and racist structures, pretty much. And we also ran into a lot of protests along the way. Sometimes very scary, sometimes comical, like the size of this flag being just enormous. I mean, I have seen so much of this stuff that I'm probably numb to it, and I find it all just kind of comical. But please, if you have any questions, I'll answer anything I can. We can talk about this stuff later. And then I try to kind of show you scenes where you may not see, it may not be visually apparent what I'm kind of portraying in these scenes, but this island is called Sullivan's Island, and this is where about 40% in Charleston, South Carolina, this is where 4,000 the most slaves came into this port from Africa. Like this is the largest slave port in America at the time. And yeah, this stuff, most of these are from Richmond. I was lucky. I mean, I went down there to kind of photograph the landscape of it. I didn't know there would be so much actual protest going on. So that was a little bit surprising to me, it was great to see, and it felt really lively. All of the protests that I saw were pretty much peaceful. I didn't see any kind of violence happening. So it was just people outside protesting, and it was good to see. But pretty much Richmond was shut down at this point. Everything was boarded up. This is the first Confederate, maybe not the first, but one of the Confederate White Houses that I found along the way. This one's in Richmond. We were there for some getting toppled. So like on a Tuesday, I photographed this sculpture. When I'm photographing, I usually photograph all around the sculpture to get a lot of views to look at later, because we're usually on the go. Sometimes we're being stared at a lot and we're kind of uncomfortable. So we kind of make pictures pretty fast, actually. And then we were always checking the news. I think I get Confederate news alerts on my cell phone, which I have definitely turned off since this project. But pretty much we found at like a 7 a.m. a group of protesters pulled this piece off of the pedestal, and we went to go photograph the pedestal the next morning. Like that same morning it happened, actually, I'm glad I was there that week. I mean, a lot of stuff was coming down that week, which is pretty interesting. So these are all around in Virginia. This is right outside of Washington, D.C. And then the road trip was kind of photographing the schools that were changing names. all across the South. I mean, some of them changed names, most of them had not at that point, but a lot since I did the project have come to terms with changing their name to something more appropriate. Yeah, so I try to have fun with all the photographs I'm making pretty much. Like, I mean, even if I'm trying to make them like so that people will actually look at them. I mean, you can photograph all these Confederate monuments. I don't think that'll be interesting for anybody to actually see most of them. But when there's like this Joker faced man, it makes it kind of more captivating. So this picture is of Matthew Fontaine Maury, who was an oceanographer and was a big part of the Confederate Navy. And you can see that on the left side is a before, and then when we went back a month later, the after with all of the pieces gone. I did a lot of before and after work. I think I showed that picture already. This is from Albert, sorry. This is a Confederate named Albert Pike, who this sculpture exists in the downtown DC. Right outside of DC, we saw a change in a new change for those schools like I was talking about. You can see that it says Robert E. Lee High School at the bottom. I don't know why they left that up. It's kind of ridiculous that you change the name to John Lewis High School and then have that on the bottom there, but maybe it was the day it changed. I don't know. This was in Tuskegee, Alabama, where, you know, my family's from, well, my dad's side of the family's from Montgomery. So this is very close to home for me. I've been down there a lot, and that was an interesting place to see. I didn't actually know when I was a kid that all that stuff was happening, or that at least all this Confederate monument work was still up. And that still exists. Most of these places still exist. Another before and after. I was just standing on the street photographing an Arthur Ashe memorial in our monument in Richmond. And this happened, I mean, out of nowhere. And then 3 minutes later, two young women show up to like scratch it off, not scratch it off, but like clean it. It was amazing. They cleaned it in like 2 minutes, and then it was gone. And then he came back and there was a confrontation. It was a wild day in Richmond. I mean, I did not know all this would happen. It was pretty interesting. I looked for this for a long time and didn't find where the sculpture was supposed to be, but then I realized that the brick was where it was. This was outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And on the back end of the trip, I was photographing a lot more schools, because there's a ton of schools in like Western Virginia that have the names of Confederate soldiers. Yeah, this is one of my favorites. It's like the most boring piece on earth. I love it so much. Another before and after from Richmond. This is a Jefferson Davis Memorial on Monument Avenue. And yeah, you can see that this says, if you look closely, it says Stonewall Jackson High School there. This was in near Charleston, West Virginia. This was this is inside of Birmingham, Alabama, where this just came down, I think, a week or two before we photographed it. And back to Richmond, where I made most of the pieces that were part of the National Geographic's first story were from Richmond. Then we went on the road and found some crazy stuff like this Nathan Bedford Forrest. I know way too much about Confederate soldiers, by the way, or Confederate monuments and the people in the Confederates themselves now. This is on the side of the highway. I actually had my driver, or my friend with me, stop on the highway because there was no other way to make this photograph. It was on private property. We didn't want to break that law, so we decided that it was easier to break the law of stopping in the shoulder on the highway and making this photograph really quickly. That's that again. And the pieces that got most popular were these pieces of a night projection on the Robert E. Lee Monument, which Maisie just mentioned in her talk a minute ago. These projections were put on by a man named Dustin Klein, who runs a company his own company named Videometry, and he does these large scale projections. And he's still doing this on these monuments. He's been doing it for over a year now. I think it's really great that he's dedicated himself to continually showing these pieces. So one night in Richmond, I contacted him. He was a friend of a friend, and I knew he was doing it. And we just went out at midnight and photographed for hours trying to make one good photograph. And we came back with a ton of work that was super powerful. I was lucky enough to get this on the cover of a National Geographic for the January issue. So that was really great. I mean, I grew up with National Geographic, and it was nice to, it was great. It was just an awesome moment. And I'm so glad they used it for the cover, because it could have just not happened. I didn't photograph it knowing that it would happen. It was just kind of a kind of beautiful moment in time. These last two pictures in this section, there's a lot more to show you, but I just wanted to, this is kind of the most ridiculous thing we saw. One of the most ridiculous things, like the Stonewall Jackson was a Confederate general, and he was injured by friendly fire. I think he was shot in the arm and they cut off his arm to save it, but then they buried his arm here, and across the state, they buried his body some days later. Wait, what was it? May 10th? Yeah, May 3rd, 1863, May 10th, 1863. He died 7 days later on this property where he was living, I guess, at the time. But yeah, so this is that's my self-portrait there. This is kind of, I don't do many self-portraits, so this was definitely a weird moment for me. But yeah, so Laron, what's up?
Hey, Chris. Thanks so much for your presentation. And you know what I just found out? I found out that we are both from Queens, and both our parents are from Alabama.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'm from Tuscaloosa, and my mother's from Eutaw, Alabama. EUTAW, Alabama.
Okay. Right? Yeah, I've been there. Cool. Oh, wow. That's funny.
It's amazing,
it's a small world.
But you know what you made me think about? What did it mean for you to go back into the landscape? Now, Virginia is not Alabama, but what did it mean to go back into the landscape of segregation, into the environment in which your parents and my parents sort of grew up, in terms of segregation? And that picture of you next to Stonewall Jackson puts you actually in the landscape of that particular history. And going by what you said, right? 179 or 180 monuments and scenes you covered, auction blocks, Confederate monuments, schools with troublesome names.
Yeah.
And all of that particular history, right? And so there you're next to Stonewall Jackson's, right, sort of tombstone there. Mm-hmm. And you said you were beginning to be stared at by people. So not only is that the troublesome landscape of, your parents, my parents, in terms of segregation, but here you are revisiting that history in person. And then you're being stared at. What did that feel like?
It's fun. It's weird because like at some point I'm just really numb to it. Every day there was something crazy happening because we were photographing very fast, meaning like we would stop at a scene for, this one was actually one of the longer places we stayed because we had to walk about half an hour to get to this because it was blocked off. But most of the time I had this huge map that I made of where everything was. And we would go around photographing maybe for 15 minutes at a time back on the road. So we were pretty much in a car from 10 till, or maybe 10, like we're in the car from 8 till maybe 8 at night photographing on the road. And yeah, every single day there was a point where we're like, okay, I don't know how to me, like I said, I'm super numb by the stairs. It happens. We just keep walking. We have to make the work, right? We're on a job, right? So it's not like I can stop making the work. Like when I saw this guy here, I was like, he was not dangerous to me. He was just being who he was being. And I was like, I'm going to photograph him. I mean, I wasn't the only person on the street. It wasn't like me and him. It was like 10, 15 other people. So I didn't feel, I thought it was kind of funny. I thought it was kind of ridiculous that this was happening in front of my eyes in this place. Like why would you do this in daylight on a place where there's a lot of police officers? And I was like, oh, that's like the comfort level. So I started to think more about it than just about myself and being scared about these moments. I mean, there was a point in Charleston, South Carolina, where me and my friend were just walking on the street. We walked a lot that day. And as soon as we got out of the car and started walking in Charleston, a guy on a bike passed us and said that James Blake's murder was justified. He didn't stop. He just kept going. And I was just like, oh, okay, that's what Charleston's about, I guess. And, that was a few more times that happened in Charleston. And then we got, stopped by police officers for no reason in West Virginia. I think that the stories that really, that I resonate with more, that hurt me more, were the stories of my cousins in Alabama, actually. Like I have an uncle in Alabama who died of COVID, unfortunately, about a month after I was there photographing him. And he was talking to me there, which I never heard before, about him walking in one of the Selma marches. Like he was part of like the second of 3 Selma marches down there. And I didn't know. I've known him my whole life. And I didn't know that he was part of those marches, those like historic marches. So that was really powerful. And another story about my cousin who named Kendall, who attended like Sidney Lanier High School in Montgomery, Alabama, which is named after a Confederate. And he mentioned that he always wanted to go to Booker T. Washington High School across the like a mile away, which is even more close to his house that he didn't get to go to, which is named after a Black man. So he had to go to this farther school, which is named after a Confederate. And he still remembers this, like it's trauma. This stuff is trauma. But for me, I didn't live that trauma really, so I didn't feel it. I just felt for him more than myself, really.
Yeah, it's interesting when you mentioned trauma, right? So, for me, there's like two kinds of momentum, just going off of what you're saying, right? So, we think of Emanuel AME in 2015, but before that, you have hundreds of years of the sort of racial trauma happening in these landscapes. And then you mentioned your family being active in the kinds of protests to reverse that trauma, right?
Yep.
And then in your presentation, you mentioned this idea of fun, right? How you can engage these spaces with fun. And for me, I'm thinking, okay, so do you mean fun as a way to apply some kind of critical dissonance, right? Because it's not fun as fun, but the ways in which you are capturing some of these things, and the way, especially this one, it's kind of a critical dissonance. Would you say?
Totally. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not funny. It's comical. Like it's like a dark comedy on the streets of our America, right? Like it's all pain and suffering, and it's made comical by the way that these things look eventually. I mean, even if there was no paint on his face, this is a comical sculpture. It's ridiculous. And, for me, I feel like it doesn't even matter if this person was a Confederate or like a racist or anything. It's kind of a dumb sculpture, right? To have this on the middle of a street that is profoundly like astute is just like unbelievable. It makes the whole thing a joke to me. That's what I mean by fun, right? Like that's what I mean by fun. Like it's just a joke. The whole thing's a joke. It's not a funny joke.
Yeah, it's sort of like, Cornel West says that the tragicomic, tragedy and comedy at the same time,
Totally.
And what, did you have like a visceral experience entering this sort of environment in which it's coming from everywhere? The reinforcement of this idea of the Confederacy, or the idea that you're surrounded by symbols that were enforcing history or white supremacist rule over an entire population of African Americans. Did you feel any sense of what they were feeling, or as a New Yorker and you're entering the situation, or as a visitor? I mean, was there a way in which you found some kind of empathy with what they realized, but at the same time, as an artist, you have to address it with a sort of critical eye that can speak to here National Geographic, right? A sort of broader audience. Was there a moment in which you're sort of caught between being in the moment and then recognizing that you're here to capture a larger historical circumstance?
That was a lot of questions, and I'm trying to figure out which one to answer first. For me, to call it historic, thank you very much. I just made the work because I had wanted to make this kind of work in Richmond for a long time, at least in Richmond. And, but I never had the opportunity to go down there and actually do it. But so it was like a perfect opportunity for me to do it when this stuff was happening. It made for far more interesting photographs that people would actually look at. I don't think like, I'll get into the bit of like these photographs where it's like, okay, well, probably no one cares. Like no one's going to actually look at the black and white work that I made of all the monuments. So I ask your question again, because there was a lot of questions there.
Was there a moment in which you saw yourself, I think this is the gist of the questions, was there a moment in which you saw yourself as a sort of historical agent to sort of capture this moment for sort of future generations?
No, because I'm just making the work. So like if I am able to make a piece of art that people resonate with, then I am lucky. Like, that's how I feel about it. So for me, it's just going out and trying to make the best photographs that I possibly can in the situation. And then the world has to decide if they like it or not. Like I can't be the person that decides that for everybody. So yeah, I just make the work, and hopefully it can live on. Like we get photographers sometimes get like really lucky and fortunate that, the work is looked at. Because I know a lot of photographers that make excellent work that is just not looked at, or not, if it wasn't a Nat Geo project, would anybody have seen it? Like that is like, would we have this conversation if Nat Geo didn't run the thing on the cover? Like this is a lot of pieces here that I can't, are not in my control,
Thank you.
What was your other question?
Well, I have another question, Steve. There's so many ideas, you know. So in terms of, for the audience, in terms of your approach to your practice, there may not be one approach, but is there a way in which when you see a scene, it could be protesters, it could be police, there could be Confederate protesters and Black Lives Matter protesters. How do you sort of enter the scene? If you can give the audience a sort of sense of how you approach a scene like that.
Yeah, so the first day we showed up in Richmond, we got there about 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. We walked out of our house, our Airbnb, and I think it was about 150,000 degrees outside, all humidity. And we were just like, okay, well, that's part one. We then went back in the house and I put on shorts instead of pants, and then walked over. We stayed about 3 blocks away from Monument Avenue, which is where all these kind of monuments are in Richmond. And we saw that there was a full-on like church sermon going on at the statue. There was maybe 1,000 people outside, and there was separation between people, so we didn't feel like dangerous, like COVID danger, but it was still unnerving. We just came out of quarantine and we were just pushed into a situation where there was 1,000 people on the street, and we were just double masked and like trying to make photographs. I was with someone who was a photographer also, so after he helped me out a bit, he's using a bigger camera. I use a medium format digital camera, and I used to use a 4.5, like a big 4.5 view camera, but he was still using that. So he was out with like a tripod. Oh, we both had tripods, but he was out with a huge camera that people were like looking at, and I could just be elsewhere making photographs while people were like staring at his like silver, beautiful, like old school camera, right? So he was a deterrent. He was my deterrent, which was really good for me in that situation where I could just sit back, see the scene, and try to walk around this. I think I walked around the statue 15 times trying to make photographs over the course of like the whole day. So yeah, that's how it was that was the first day. And then it was like that for 6 or 7 days in a row, like people outside, weekday, weekend, until midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning. We would go back out. People would still be there playing basketball or, you know, doing any, like just having fun, really, kind of being a nuisance to the police, I bet. But then, you know, they disappeared as well, the police.
Mm-hmm. So these scenes weren't just scenes of protest, but they became centers of social activity, play.
It was more about social activity. It wasn't actually a protest. There was no marching. There was no chanting. It was more just being around each other. I think it was, and it wasn't all like a black scene. It was like totally mixed. I mean, Richmond is it's a very mixed city. And I think that the surrounding areas are coming into town as well. And it felt like a good mix. I knew that when we were down there was supposed to be a right rally also. And I don't think that happened because it was kind of shut down, but you know, that would have been interesting to see those. I wouldn't have been there for that because I'm not a protest photographer. I don't consider myself a photojournalist at all. I don't need to be in the middle of like a war. Like but it would have been interesting to see. I mean, that's what we came upon in Charleston, where there was like one side was Black Lives Matter protests. The other side was guarding like a Confederate monument, and they were just screaming at each other. There was nothing happening. They were just screaming at each other from 50 feet away, which seems just like the internet, but in real life, you know, like it just felt very similar. But that reminds me of, I forgot. Do you have another question?
So can you describe this series here, the black and white images in the text? Could you describe that?
Yeah, sorry for everyone that can't read this text. These are pieces from my next book that's coming out, and the text is just really small on screen. If you can read it, good luck and congratulations for your eyesight. And the book will come out at the early next year with all the works that you just saw today, most of the work. And this series is that road trip. This is a 4,000-mile road trip photographing 8 states, and I think just under 200 Confederate monuments in those 8 states. So that was it. I mean, this is like by state. I mean, this was a 3-state thing because there was not so many left in these. A lot have been torn down already. Not a lot. A few had been torn down already, and most of these things still exist. They're all over the place. They're in places that are, like mixed communities, not mixed communities. They're everywhere. I mean, they're in big cities, at state houses, courthouse, a lot of courthouses. The one thing I realized that there's a ton of Confederate monuments outside of courthouses in the South. We drove from Augusta, Georgia to, Athens? I forgot which one. I think we drove from Athens, or no, Augusta, Georgia to Atlanta, Georgia. We thought it was going to take 2 hours because the highway said 2 hours. We're just going to jump off up and down the highway to make photographs because we saw that there was a lot of Confederate monuments. We ended up photographing for 10 hours and we photographed, I think 17 or 18 Confederate monuments over the course of the 2 hour drive on the highway in all the different towns, all the different courthouses. And when you'll see that in a moment here, but yeah, so that was kind of surprising to me that we could see so much in so little time in one day. I mean, I could have definitely done this project. I could still be doing this project, like, because there's that many. I think there's still about, there's over 3,000 Confederate monuments in the South, and I photographed 200.
That's serious density.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like in your mind, before we go into the Q&A, Chris, in your mind, how do you think people realize that density? Do you think people living in these situations every day could sort of realize the density, what it meant to have the Confederacy reinforced in school names in these sort of mundane ways? Yeah.
I have had a few conversations with people from the South that are from places I didn't even know they were from the South. And they were just like, yeah, I remember growing up and that being down the street from my house and me walking past it to go to school every single day. And at some point it just they come numb to it, just like I have become numb to it, but it's painful. People remember this stuff forever. I mean, I told a friend of mine who's an architect up here in New York, that like, I went to his town. He was like, oh my God, no one ever goes to that town. There's nothing there. And I was like, yeah, your town has 2 Confederate monuments, a huge Confederate flag at the end of the street under an ice cream store. And now they have a Martin Luther King monument next to the new courthouse. And I was like, and he was like, oh, really? I didn't even know that they built that. Like, kind of, he's, surrounded by this Confederacy. And it just is. I mean, the South is this. Every state in the South has over 50 of these Confederate monuments still. I mean, it's like it's part of the culture there. And I think that is, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. I really appreciate your answering all these questions and the importance. Your work is really, really important. And I think people in the audience have really gotten a lot from just even this brief conversation. I'm just going to open it up here for the Q&A and ask you a few questions.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm going to go I'm going to just show you the Alabama stuff really quick in the black and white. And then when we get back to color work, we'll just go through, because like, yeah, like you can see the first Confederate, like this is the first Confederate White House here. And this is across the street from the state capitol, which is also fantastic, like good placement there. So nobody ever forgets. This is the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, where the marches started. There's a lot, and this is down the street in a cemetery, which is like I'm glad that was funky. I mean, a lady came up to me there and wouldn't let me, a United Daughters of the Confederate is what she called her. She was part of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. She came up to me as I was photographing there, because every time we went to a cemetery, there was at least one person guarding the Confederate monument. Like in Virginia, in Georgia, in Alabama, and in West Virginia, every time we went to a cemetery, which was not many cemeteries, there was a person in a car or just reading a book guarding the monument all day, because that's how dangerous it was for them. They thought that they would just be torn down because, hey, they should probably be torn down. But I was like, if it's in cemeteries or private property, do what you want. Like for me, it's like, you do what you want on a private property, as long as I don't have to see it on the street, kind of. That's how I feel about these things. Anyway, yes, you can ask questions. I end this part of the book, which is a middle section of that color. So the color work is called Latency. This is called The Southern Horror, based on Ida B. Wells' Southern Horrors. And this was John Brown's fort, someone who kind of fought to end slavery a little bit before he ended up going crazy. And anyway, so that was in West Virginia, and I end that part of the book there. But I'm just going to show some other new works as we go through questions, as I'm start to deal with like more American landscape problems. But yes, please ask away.
Okay. So we have one question here. It asks, the person asks, many of your pieces in the Latency Project center this graffiti on Confederate monuments. I'm wondering if you think graffiti is an important form of historical/political discourse, and if so, why?
every person that likes Confederate monuments hates that the graffiti was on them so much that it's funny. It's again funny to me that you have so much hate for the graffiti. I call the project latency because I think that we're catching up with what should have happened in the past. These things should have never been erected in the first place. And now that they're getting painted on, yeah, you can have your feelings, but I hope that they keep getting painted on over and over and over again until they're gone from view. So yeah, people had feelings, but I already forgot the question. I can always never answer a question with so if I don't answer the question, please let me know.
No, you answered it. You answered it.
There's some like monuments from like Black people that are springing up all across also.
Yeah, how do you feel about that transference, right? So going from the Confederate monument to now you have an interest in Black monumentality replacing the Confederate. How do you see that sort of transitioning happening? Or do you see it happening fast enough?
It's not happening a lot, but also I just have to say that I'm just not a fan of monuments, right? Like at this point, I feel like there should probably not be so many monuments. I don't think that we need to dedicate things to that many people on the streets. That's like a real broad statement, but there's some really beautiful monuments out there that really mean something. But there's a lot of people that are just problematic figures. Like, I just showed this like picture of John, like this is James Brown. He's super problematic. And it's just like that you almost can never get around the problematic nature of putting a man on a pedestal. It's just like, it's a problem. It will always be a problem. There will always be future problems with it. So I am like totally like, if there was no monuments, life would go on just as easy as it did with the monuments. So I'm a no monument person after doing this project, because this is like, it causes too many problems. Way too many problems. Of course, some monuments are needed because they have to fight the opposite. This exists. This is where Rosa Parks got on the bus in Montgomery, Alabama. And this is new. I went there 5 years ago to see family and it wasn't there. And then like last year it was there. And I think that monuments like this are pretty cool. It tells a story. It's not, I don't know. I can go into the monument thing for like a full hour, but I feel like maybe no more monuments at all. Can we all agree that we don't need them? So please.
We'll take a consensus.
This one's nice. I think this is a cool one. This is in DC. I think they're always just fighting against the racism that exists right next to where they exist, right? That's pretty much what the Black monument has become, like fighting against the white monument of the past.
Right. So this question, this a person in the audience is asking, can you comment on the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue in Richmond early this month? How did you feel when it was officially removed?
I was shocked that they actually did it, because I thought that I thought it was enormous, and I thought that they would just never get the rights to move it. But they did finally, and I'm so happy it's gone. They asked me to go, Nat Geo asked me to go photograph it, but I was just busy with other work, so I couldn't go down. But I also don't really need to be photographing more monuments. I think I've done enough work with that. But yeah, I'm so glad it's gone. And I wish they got rid of the pedestal. The problem with these things is they have this like stone pedestals that they should be making schools out of or something. I don't know, like just get rid of the pedestals too. We don't need to see the pedestal. So I'm like, they didn't do enough. That's how I feel about that. Take away the whole thing. Make it a park.
Make it a park. But the pedestal became something else, right? So there was a projection of Breonna Taylor. There was graffiti on it. It just became something else. What did it feel like witnessing that thing it became when it was graffitied and written on, and people were playing with it? It wasn't quite a monument, was it? What did you identify it as?
Everybody, when I was down in Richmond for that specific photograph, the people that were around were talking about the square. It used to be called Lee Square because it was Robert E. Lee's statue. And they changed that to, all the people on the street were calling it Marcus David Peters Square, which is a Black man who died in police he was murdered by police in Richmond. And they kept calling it that. And that was interesting to me, because I was like, I don't know who that is. And I now have to do research on like what that means, what it means to change the name of something unofficially. What was your question? I'm sorry. There's so much stuff that goes through my mind with
Andrew.
these photographs. Like I just see these photographs, like this is some new work too. And I'm just looking at it like, why would I show you this photograph? It's so weird. But like, if you look closely, it's like this Native American story, this fake story that has been told for so long. It becomes tiring. What was your question?
No, you actually did answer it. It became an intersection for something else, an intersection for sort of social engagement. When Robert E. Lee was decentered, it just became an intersection, And
Yeah.
there you are at this place where these different populations, during a pandemic, we didn't even touch the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
During a pandemic, they're out there sort of putting their political interest, bringing their political interest to the fore because everyone has a stake in history, And for me, that's really something powerful in your work, and that you're documenting people during a pandemic going to a site over their political interest and to sort of reinforce or to sort of not forget what is important to them about what should be remembered. And you're right there documenting it. And I just think that's really, really powerful.
And yeah, I mean, to me, it's powerful after the fact, because I think when I was there, I was so concerned about trying to make an image, and it's not easy. Like, it's just not, I mean, I have never found photography easy, especially when you're photographing like landscape in the world, because there's a lot of people who have photographed these landscapes before. And I don't claim to think that I'm better at doing that than anybody else. So to find something interesting, sometimes you get lucky. And I think that it was very interesting to photograph something that had never been done before, meaning those projections on that monument in this part of time with the history that was laden into it became a bunch of stuff that made it it just made it easier. I mean, it made it easier to make a good photograph. It's like if you're photographing the Pyramid of Giza, like it's pretty easy to make a good photograph of that. And it's very hard to make a good photograph in Richmond on the street if that wasn't happening. So I was just there for the right moment at the right time, like most photographers in the past have. I have a skill that I'm stuck with. I mean, and everyone else has to be stuck with that my skill in it also. Like I can't do it like anybody else. And hopefully I'm growing as a photographer, and people, can resonate with the work. I think that's the most important part.
I think so. For the many people who are still here, for the over 100 people who are still in the audience.
Yeah, thanks. I've been talking for a long ass time. Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chris, in these last few minutes, can you tell us about your forthcoming book and when we can expect it?
So I am making a 2-book set. It's called Truth and Ruin. And the first book is called Privileged Mediocrity. You can see most of the work on my website. So Privileged Mediocrity is this kind of story about American landscape and portraiture of people within. So it's called Privileged Mediocrity and the Deceived Within. And it just deals with American landscape, racism in the landscape, like gentrification, industrial, how do I explain it? Like problems in climate change, climate change, pollution, environmental concerns, as well as the racism in the landscape. There's a lot of different stories there. And I'm just trying to weave this kind of web of what you're seeing every day. There's nothing normal about this. There's something wrong here. We pass things every day that are problematic and we just think that they're okay, but we have to call it out more. I think it's really important. And so that's one book. And then the second book is the latency work and with a Southern horror built into that book. So that book will come as a set. I'm trying to make it, I try to keep my publishing as inexpensive as possible, but I think that book's going to have to, it's a 2-book set. So it's probably going to be about $70 or $80, which is unfortunately expensive, but I'm co-publishing it with a press named Hot J Kantz, Berlin photography book publisher, Berlin based, and they'll get 500 copies of it. I'll get 500 copies, and then we'll just distribute it elsewhere. They'll do Europe and I'll do here. So that's pretty much what is next for me. And I think that we're done with the book. We're waiting for an essay from an amazing essayist. And then we'll have that ready in January or February, hopefully. I mean, really early next year is when we come out with that book.
Thanks so much for your time today, Chris. You know,
no problem. We don't. Are we?
really,
Do we answer all the questions? I love answering all the questions. Can we like rapid fire the rest or something?
lunchtime chat, Chris. Lunchtime chat.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But thank you so much, Chris. You know, I know everyone in the audience just really appreciates everything that you had to say. And, you know, I thank everyone in the audience for joining us today and engaging with us, you know, these really important ideas with us. And the forthcoming lunch time chat is available on the Getty website. And, you know, thank you everyone for coming today. And thank you, Chris, for speaking with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.